We're now at the end of Module 18, but we'll summarize what we've learned in this module. In this section, we introduce the four-step process of hypothesis testing. The first step is to determine the hypotheses, the null and the alternative. The hypotheses are claims about the populations, or population singular or populations plural, depending on the context. The null hypothesis is a hypothesis that a parameter equals a specific value. The alternative hypothesis is the competing claim that the parameter is less than, greater than, or not equal to the parameter value in the null. The claim that drives the statistical investigation is usually found in the alternative hypothesis. Step 2, we collect the data. Because the hypothesis test is based on probability, randomly selecting or assigning is essential in data production. Step 3 would be to assess the evidence. Use the data to find a p-value. Then the p-value is a probability statement about how unlikely the data is if the null hypothesis is true. More specifically, the p-value gives the probability of sample results at least as extreme as the data in the null hypothesis, if the null hypothesis is true. Step 4, give the conclusion. A small p-value says the data is unlikely to occur if the null hypothesis is true. We therefore conclude that the null hypothesis is probably not true and that the alternative hypothesis is true instead. We often choose a significance level as a benchmark for judging the p-value if it's small enough. If the p-value is less than or equal to the significance level, we reject the null hypothesis and accept the alternative hypothesis instead. If the p-value is greater than the significance level, we say that we fail to reject the null hypothesis. We never say that we accept our null hypothesis. We just say that we don't have enough evidence to reject it. Like we said on the previous page, sometimes you're almost sure that someone is guilty when they're being judged, on trial. But if there's not enough evidence, you can't say they're guilty. So you just say that there's not enough evidence to say they're guilty, but you're really definitely not saying that they're innocent. There's just not enough evidence to prove it. So that's kind of the same thing. You might have a feeling about the null hypothesis is not true, but the p-value and the significance level, the way that one is larger than the other, it shows that I can't reject the null hypothesis. Even if I have a feeling about it being not true, you might conduct another statistical investigation again to see if you can do it again. This is equivalent to saying that we don't have enough evidence to support the alternative hypothesis. Our conclusion will respond to the research questions, so we often state the conclusion in terms of the alternative hypothesis.